Back with you here in Focus, and thanks for staying on. The DA in Gauteng says that food banks have run out of stock in cities of Ekurhuleni and Tshwane. The party says it received numerous complaints from vulnerable residents in the province, which prompted it to embark on an oversight inspection. And for a reaction on the DA statement, we are joined now by Gauteng Social Development MEC, Mbali. MEC, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. This is a complaint, I suppose, that could have been raised sometime in December, just ahead of the festive season, that the food banks would have been running out of stock. Is that the situation that is still prevalent on the ground? Have you done your own assessment as to where things are?
Hi, Kevin. Hello to all your listeners. You know, we saw the statement, and I must just indicate, I think it's really just unnecessarily raising alarms. One, there's a plethora of ways that our department is able to ensure that there's food relief. One is through our food banks, and the other is through the NPOs, as you know, that we have the highest number or highest amount that we're spending towards our NPOs. A total amount of 2.3 billion is what we allocate towards our NPOs. And so in terms of food relief, we do a mixture of both the food bank, because the food bank items are brought through the tender system, and also we've got these NPOs, as I'm indicating, that we're able to utilize to make sure that those who are vulnerable are given food. So part of the fundamental flaw with the DA's statement is that it makes an accusation that there's absolutely no food around for individuals, which was not correct. And we've been able to show that it would appear that they've not been able to look into the entirety of the information that has been provided to them, unfortunately, which would then draw them to raising this. But let me indicate what is happening in terms of the food banks. The food banks right now, we are buying through what we call a deviation, because our tender is currently being advertised. We had to put it on hold because what we realized was that the department has been giving food to individuals. However, as per the Stats SA data that has come through, but also coupled with the data that's coming out of our own research institute called the GCRO in the province, it indicates that poverty is escalating. So we may then argue that with the money that we have placed throughout the years, we seem not to be decreasing the poverty to the extent that we would want it to, but it is escalating over time. So part of the reasons why there's been the delay in the tender and why we've diverted to what we call a deviation is because in the tender that we used to provide, instead of giving just simple the food items that we give for a period of 3 months because there's a high demand, which essentially means that we're giving families food for 3 months and then we move on to the next group of families. What we've said is that as part of the requirements and what needs to be installed into the tender is that we must also factor in seeds so that people are able to plant. So the whole logic behind it is that we really are moving away from handouts to hand-ups. And also it's a sustainable way of ensuring that we're able to deal with poverty altogether, instead of giving people a food parcel for 3 months and then they go back to where their situation is. And that's why we felt that the statement was alarmist and very unfortunate, because it doesn't seem to have a comprehension of the totality of the work that is being done in terms of the provision of food, and that we continue to do. We had a huge expansion with the Premier just in December, but they seem not to, they intentionally don't factor that in and only speak about the food and that the tender has not been finalized. But we're giving a reason why we've taken a different approach, and it's scientific. It's based on data that is there.
Yes. So to be certain that you are saying that the food banks are low on stock and still currently so because of this process of the renewal of the contract, and so there's a special dispensation that is currently happening right now.
So what I'm essentially saying is that we've got food that is there that we buy through a deviation.
Yes.
But as and when, as you know, the more people that you give, you will run out at a particular time. And then you have to order again. And that's what happens. So when the DA goes there, they go, let's say, at a time when the food bank is relatively empty. Yes. And then they want to raise an alarm and say there's absolutely no food that's there. There's no food that's been given to people and so on. It's a warped picture of what reality is.
So hence that's what I want to say. Where are they getting this perception that whenever they go there, there must be an abundance of food? Was that something that was happening before where you would have stockpiles that would be there, but now because of this deviation that you are talking of in terms of restocking, the stocks are generally being kept quite low to a point that what you have, you use, and then at some point they'll come there and they'll find that it's not stocked up to the level that I suppose they would have known it to be.
It fluctuates. So, for example, I mean, we're not a pick and pay and so forth, so it fluctuates. The more demands that you have and the more we release the food, you'll certainly see those fluctuations where you're beginning to see an emptying out. But before it gets fully empty, then they are able to procure additional food and so forth. But as I'm saying, it's because we're currently doing the deviation now, yes, but we're also are utilizing our NPOs. But so, also what you can't ignore is that there's no expectation that was there on their side. But you must also appreciate that we are in silly season. Yes. Elections are around the corner. So, the games of electioneering and the politics that are accompanied with it will certainly be at play. And it's, I suppose, we are not immune to that. So we understand that it's part and parcel of the games at play.
So when are we likely to be out of this space of a deviation, and when would, so to speak, the contract be properly set in place?
So what we have indicated, and which we've also communicated to the legislature, was that before the financial year closes, we would have finalized on the tender. Because, as I indicate, the team, based on the data that was coming through, it would be irresponsible for us to continue with the tender where the numbers and the data is showing you that what you're utilizing as an intervention is not working in the manner that you want it to be. And that's why we had to quickly put a pause to the system so that our finance team is able to do the calculations and factor in the seedlings that are there. Because as you know, that our two departments of both social development and agriculture were combined. And it really has assisted us to be able to see things a bit more differently, but also see how do we combine, particularly on food security, sustainable measures that we can put in place. So we've given the indication that before the end of the financial year, this will be concluded. As I indicate, it is already set in place and this will be finalized. So it's not something that is going to be there forever, but this tender is for 2 years. So that's why we needed to make sure that instead of us shouting and lamenting about the same thing and seeing the numbers continue to increase, we need to be proactive. Yeah. And we are a government that's all about sustainability and long-term solutions.
I suppose then the other question is you've kind of touched on and answered it, whether there are contingencies that have been planned. And as you're saying, there are other ways in which NGOs, one being one of them, but also the interventions that you're speaking of getting the people to be self-reliant in terms of producing for themselves. Are those the only interventions?
So, as you know, that we do have a number of NGOs that we utilize. And the good thing about it is that they provide not just the food, but also the care, particularly for those who are vulnerable. So your elderly, an individual who can no longer take care of themselves physically, they take care of that. So they do the daily, just taking care of them, making sure that they are bathed and so forth. Those who are HIV positive and so forth. So really those who are vulnerable and can't take care of themselves, that's where our NGOs come in to make sure that they're fed. Because what we also can't risk is to have people who are in a dire situation taking medicine on an empty stomach. So that's why we're saying that there's always provision. And we've looked into all of that so that as we're dealing with the conclusion of this new tender and how we're revising it for sustainability purposes, we continue. And that's why we were able to have a huge expansion. And our numbers show that in terms of the work that we're doing and that we've been able to intensify through the NPOs, we're reaching our numbers. So there really is no crisis. And it's just unfortunate that it's, for the purposes of electioneering, this is what would then take place.
Just on that point, is a point of just reference. Did they write to you a letter demanding answers to the situation, or is it something that they just wrote a statement about and put in the media?
Oh, we saw a statement on the media. But what we have done, we are communicating with the portfolio committee as and when we are required to come and respond, we do so. If the DA has any questions, we respond accordingly in line with the obligation that we have, because we do need to be accountable. So we do that, but like I'm saying, it is silly season, so you do anticipate that some are some of the things that will take place.
MEC, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us. Gauteng Social Development MEC there, Mbali Hlophe, responding to that concern.